A hush fell upon Valinor as the twilight of a new doubt crept into the hearts of the Valar. For an age they had dwelt in apparent unity under the will of Eru Iluvatar, shaping j.r.r. according to the great music. Yet, unknown to most, subtle tremors were stirring beneath the polished surface of harmony. "Do you ever wonder," Irmo said, his voice tremulous in the hushed groves of Lorien, "whether we have the right to dream new shapes for this world?" He stood amidst an orchard of silver-barked trees, their leaves shimmering like moonlit mirrors. Irmo, the master of dreams and visions, wore an expression torn between awe and ambition. At his side stood Mandos, Namo, the doomsman of the Valar, whose face was unreadable, yet whose eyes glinted with a somber fervor. Mandos let the silence stand between them for a long moment. Finally, in a voice cool as distant thunder, he replied, "To question Eru's plan, dear brother, is no small matter. But the doom I speak has grown weary. I have seen fates laid out like threads in a loom, all leading to the same tapestry. Must all things end as foreordained, or can we, whose power is second only to Iluvatar, shape a grander design?" Irmo drew a quivering breath. "Then you truly believe we can do it? Break the confines of fate itself?" Mandos inclined his head in a single, deliberate nod. "I believe the hour has come to test these bonds. And you, Irmo, I trust your subtlety. We need no open rebellion. Yet, if we weave illusions, if we sow the seeds of new destinies, the others may follow. Those who hunger for something beyond Eru's script will flock to us." The orchard seemed to darken, as though a cloud had slipped between Lorien and the gentle light of the stars. So began the conspiracy that would, in time, rend Valinor asunder. For centuries uncounted, Irmo had nurtured Arda's dreams. Yet, in secret, his own longings had grown bolder. He envisioned realms of beauty that exceeded what even Eru had conceived. But he found no room to shape them without stepping beyond the appointed bounds. Mandos, quiet and immovable, had also grown restless with pronouncing dooms not of his own making. Their union was thus forged, two pillars of unwavering authority, plotting to break the great design from within. In covert signals, they reached out to others. Mandos, in the deep corridors of his halls, whispered to a chosen few Maiar about unclaimed destinies that lay waiting in the darkness, waiting for those daring enough to seize them. Irmo, more subtle yet, poured new illusions into the dreams of men and elves, suggesting that the established order of the Valar need not be final. Within a matter of months, though in the timeless realms of the Valar, the passing of months is but the blink of an eye. Small gatherings formed. At first, they met in hidden glades in Lorien, or in the echoing passages beneath Mandos's domain. The would-be conspirators hid their disquiet from the rest of the Valar, or so they believed. The gods finally realized that they could not go alone to the chambers of the Valar, or so they believed. Far away, in a cavern lit by molten fire, Owl the Smith hammered a blade of unknown metal, dark as obsidian, yet gleaming with strange runes. Sparks danced in the dim glow, reflecting the spark of worry in Owl's eyes. He set the hammer aside and ran a rough hand over his brow. "Something stirs," he muttered. "A shadow, a doubt among my kin. I can feel it in the very bones of Arda." Nearby, one of his Maiar attendants, tall with eyes like gleaming coal, looked up uneasily. "My lord, do you suspect Melkor's foul shadow again?" Owly shook his head. "Nay, Melkor is long cast out. This is different. More cunning, perhaps. A quiet voice, not the brazen roar of the Fallen One." As if on cue, a soft glow spread at the tunnel's mouth. Irmo appeared, dressed in raiment shimmering like a half-remembered dream. Aula stiffened. Irmor was not known to visit the forge without reason. "Irma," Owl said with a note of surprise. "What brings you to my halls at such an hour?" Irmo smiled, a gesture of warmth that did nothing to dispel the sudden tension. "Merely a wish to see your artistry, dear brother. The works of your hands have always delighted my heart, and I hoped we might speak of the future. We could build together." Ole eyed him warily. "The future, you say? I would know exactly what you have in mind." Irmo lowered his voice to a gentle murmur. "Ardor is full of potential, friend. Evu has not forbidden us to improve upon what is made, has he? Dreams of a renewed world, are they not the domain of my power? And your craft could shape wonders beyond imagining if freed from every boundary." At that, Owl's eyes narrowed. "Boundaries, Irmo. Keep us faithful to the one who allowed me to bring forth the dwarves at all. This talk, it troubles me." Irmo's expression softened. "I do not speak rebellion, only possibility. My kin, there is no reason to fear. Let us explore new horizons. Think, your dwarves would stand by you in any endeavor, would they not?" The faintest tremor crossed Orly's face. He remembered all too well the moment Orly had tested him, accepting the dwarfs into the grand design after Orly's contrition. "They would follow me, I know, and that is a burden I cannot take lightly." Irmo laughed, airy as a breeze through birch leaves. "Of course not, dear brother. Still, I ask only that you keep an open mind. Great changes are afoot, whether you will them or not." Then, with a parting glow that made the torchlit cavern seem drear by contrast, Irmo vanished. Aule stood there long after, gazing at the still cooling blade upon his anvil, heart heavy with indecision. Elsewhere in Valinor's hush, a different faction prowled the night. The Knights of Feanor. Bound by a blend of family legacy, unspent wrath, and dark rumors of new power, they moved through hidden paths, meeting in vaulted chambers unlit by starlight. At their head were the surviving sons of Feanor. Some said they walked free by Mandos's permission, or by a quirk of destiny not even the Doomsman could deny. With them traveled a band of Noldoran warriors, skilled in blade and cunning. Their leader, Maedros, stood tall and grim, a red glint in his eyes that echoed the smoldering fires of his father. His council chamberlain, Belgrandes Belhamor. "We have labored in silence long enough," Maedros growled, pacing a cold marble floor. "Our father's oath, still unfulfilled, even after the passing of ages." A younger knight spoke, voice tight with eagerness. "But my lord, what do we seek now that the Silmarils are gone? Will we not earn only scorn from the Valar and elves alike?" Maedros's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "The Valar have scorned us since the kinslaying at Alqualond. Let them, if war is truly coming." He paused, as if savoring the word. "Then let us be the first to reap its advantage." Behind him, Maglor, the minstrel and mightiest singer among Feanor's sons, spoke in a voice like a lament. "Brother, I do not seek more bloodshed. Yet the knightly oath calls us to stand at the forefront of any conflict that shapes our destiny. By the fires of Father's forge, we shall not remain idle." So they agreed, forging a plan to act as assassins in the shadows. If some among the Valar turned traitor to Eru, and others rose to defend him, the Knights of Feanor would ensure that key generals and leaders, those who might threaten Noldorin ascendancy, did not live to see the dawn of open war. For the Knights believed that in chaos lay opportunity, and their hearts still burned with unquenched fervor. Though none had yet sounded a trumpet of rebellion, a sense of foreboding swept across Valinor like a gathering storm. Manwë upon Taniquetil stood at the edge of his gleaming balcony, robed in cloud and starlight. Vada stood at his side, her face pale and resolute. Light and something moves beneath our gaze, she whispered, hands clenched at her breast. Can you see it in the winds, my lord? Manwë closed his eyes, letting the wind swirl about him in eddies of half-spoken truths. I see the silhouette of doubt among our own, whispers that beckon certain hearts away from Eru's path. His breath caught as though tasting bitter air. But who it is, that remains unclear. Vada's eyes flickered with a sorrowful luminosity. Ulmo has sent word from the deeps. Strange currents swirled in the sea, as if stirred by an invisible hand. The music of creation thrums an odd note, out of harmony. If, indeed, some of our brethren have turned from Eru's light, we must discover it. Soon. Manwë laid a gentle hand on hers. We shall gather the faithful among the Valar in due time. For now, we watch, and we wait. If the betrayers reveal themselves openly, we will act with the full measure of our authority. But a quiet dread festered in the High King's heart, for he sensed that the first blow might come as a whisper, rather than a roar. In the secret depths of Lorien's twilight gardens, where moonflowers glistened and dreamlike mists swirled, Urmo and Mandos convened once more. They had already rallied a handful of Maiar who yearned for a different order. Some mortal lords had even been contacted through subtle visions. Ramthan. Mandos's voice rumbled softly. The time is at hand, Irmo. Our followers wonder when we shall declare our cause openly. They hunger for a sign, a single clarion call. Irmo's face, half lit by the glow of luminous blossoms, showed both eagerness and caution. Let them hunger a while longer, brother. A single misstep, and the rest of the Valar will descend upon us with unimaginable wrath. We must be certain that Aule's choice is made, that others stand beside us. We cannot risk the might of Taniquetil alone. The voice of the Valar began to interrupt Irmo, but he blocked it with a fist to the face. Irmo saw his mistress's gaze on him. Mandos's eyes glistened, as though with an inner flame. They will stand by us, even now. There are those among elves and men who sense that we herald a new dawn, and the Maiar, some, crave freedom from the old ways. It happens, Hamai said. Some crave freedom from the old ways. A flicker of hesitation crossed Irmo's features. And yet, if we fail, if Eru's wrath is roused... Seek him? Mandos cut him off with a gesture. We shall not fail, not when the doom of this age rests upon my lips. I have spoken it, Irmo, in the deep echoes of my halls. A new fate is coming, and it is not what Irmo has written. Irmo exhaled shakily, then nodded. Very well. We proceed with caution still. The lines will be drawn soon enough. They parted without further words, each brimming with a mix of excitement and dread. Nearby, hidden among the low-hanging boughs, one of the Knights of Feanor had crouched unseen. That silent watcher slipped away to deliver word. The treachery was real, and it was close to the cusp of unveiling. As if reflecting the brooding hearts of the Valar, the skies over Valinor grew heavy with deep purple clouds. Faint rumblings in the distance seemed to herald a coming storm, though no rain fell yet. Across the land, elves watched the horizon with unquiet eyes. Men felt an uneasy chill in the wind, and the dwarfs, ever attuned to the heartbeats of stone, sensed the deep places of the earth thrumming with tension. Aule paced his forge day and night, shaping cunning devices and forging arms that seemed destined for war. Yet he had not declared his allegiance. Each clang of his hammer echoed his internal conflict, for he recalled with reverence the voice of Eru, who had once tested him and found his heart contrite. Would he, defy the one who had breathed life into his beloved dwarfs? Meanwhile, the Knights of Feanor sharpened their blades in secret caverns, forging unholy alliances with certain mortal chieftains, who whispered, "Let the Valar squabble, we will seize the advantage." And in the fleeting corners of dreams, Irmo gently sowed illusions that intoxicated many a noble mind, promising that soon a new order would ascend. Yet no open swords had been crossed, no clarion horns of war had shattered the hush. Instead, Valinor quivered in a hush more dreadful than any thunderous assault, and in that breathless pause, like the holding of the entire world's breath, it became clear that the first blow would come not with resounding fanfare, but in the quiet gloom of betrayal. Thus ends Part 1, perched on the brink of a calamitous divide. No official battles have yet taken place, but the tapestry of treachery is nearly woven. A gloom thick as unspoken dread hung over Valinor. Though no sword had yet met another in open battle, the forging of alliances was well underway, by word, by vision, or by stealth. And in that silent flurry, few realized how rapidly events were careening toward a civil war of divine proportions. In the twilight realm of Lorien, where silver leaves and pastel blooms once exuded only peace, Irmo held a clandestine council. The place was shrouded in swirls of gentle mist, tinged with amethyst light, lending the grove an otherworldly cast. A small group of Maiar stood before him, each hooded, their faces cast in uneasy shadow. "Friends," Irmo began softly, "the time has come for us to reimagine Arda. You have seen the burdens we carry, endless ages of repeating fates. Must we be bound by the same old decrees forever?" His tone wove like a gentle lullaby, his syllable vibrating with unearthly charm. A Maiar with starlit eyes spoke up, voice trembling. "My lord, we have long served the Valar in harmony with Eru's design. Are we to deny this? Are we not betraying the very foundation of our existence?" Hush! The darkness was gradually closing. A glimmer of sunlight showed during the flight. I heard a rustle and called to Maya, but she waved me off, refusing to hear. Irmo's gaze flicked over them, kind, yet somehow electric. Betrayal is such a harsh word. Is it betrayal to wish for freedom? To share in the shaping of destinies rather than abiding them blindly? He paused, letting the hush settle. "Tell me, do you not yearn to see your gifts flourish? To see realms of wonder that even the music did not foretell?" A few Maiar nodded, expressions brightening with longing. One stepped forward, raising a trembling hand. "I have dreamt of shaping the forests beyond the Western Sea, of guiding them to new forms." His voice shook with repressed excitement. "Lord Irma, if you grant me that power, I will follow you." Irmo's lips curved in a warm smile. "And follow me you shall. Together we will birth wonders unseen. I promise you, none who stand with me will be cast aside." His eyes glittered. "We are forging a new future, and in that future, none will be overshadowed by Eru's unyielding blueprint." Stepping from behind a slender tree trunk, a tall figure cloaked in grey made a silent appearance. Mandos. In an instant, all Maiar dropped to their knees, fear etched on their faces. "This is no idle dream," Mandos intoned, voice resonant as a far-off storm. "A new doom awaits those who remain shackled to complacency. Join us, and you will be guided to the forefront of a new era, stand against us, and you shall face the might of powers who shape fate itself." He let the final words hang ominously in the hush. The effect was palpable. Hearts quickened, eyes darted in fear and wonder. One by one, the Maiar pledged loyalty, or at least promised to keep silent until the time was ripe. And thus Irmo and Mandos gathered more to their cause. Through comforting visions and dire warnings, they turned loyal hearts to uncertain allegiances. None yet realized how deftly they were being played by two of the greatest powers in Arda. While the conspirators toiled in secrecy, not all the Valar remained idle. Ulmo, Lord of Waters, had long kept to the deeps, listening to the whispered concerns of the waves and tides. Now, sensing that Arda's fate was swerving dangerously, he emerged to counsel those who might still stand firm. On a moonlit beach upon the western edge of Aman, a band of elven mariners and wise captains of men had gathered under summons. A hush fell over them as the ocean parted slightly, revealing a path of shimmering shallows. Ulmo arose from the surf, towering yet graceful, sea foam swirling around his tall, dripping figure. "Children of Eru," he said, voice like the echo of countless waves. A heaviness creeps into these waters. The Valar themselves are divided. Even in the deep, I hear the strife in their hearts. Quote, "A young elven lord, golden-hide and wearing a circlet of pearls, bowed low. 'My lord Ulmo, do you know who conspires against Eru? And how shall we defend ourselves if the very powers we once trusted now turn upon each other?' Ulmo's gaze, fathomless as the ocean, moved over the gathering. "In truth, the betrayers hide in subtlety, but I perceive illusions swirling about Lorien, like a gathering fog. And in Mandos's halls, doom is whispered that is not Eru's design." He paused, letting the weight of revelations settle. "You must fortify your hearts. Seek the counsel of those Valar who remain steadfast. Manwë and Vada, upon Taniqwetil, Aule in his forges, and Yavanna, whose love for all growing things cannot be twisted. Rally to them." A mortal captain, tall and lean, voice edged with urgency, asked, "How will we know if we stand against beings of such might?" Ulmo's expression was grave yet resolute. "You cannot fight them alone, but you can resist their seductions. Guard your spirit from illusions that promise you greatness in exchange for your loyalty." He cast a glance at the horizon, where storm clouds gathered ominously. "Arm yourselves with truth, for that alone may stand against the twisting shadows." Thus did Ulmo sow seeds of vigilance among elves and men, urging them to rally under the banner of loyalty. Yet even as his words steadied their resolve, dread coiled in every heart. If those who shaped the world now warred among themselves, what hope had mere mortals? Deep within Aule's domain, the clang of hammers against anvils rang day and night. The dwarfs, stout and tireless, labored with uncharacteristic haste, forging armor that glinted like polished obsidian, axes that sparkled with runic etchings, and cunning machines of war whose nature was yet unclear. Aule himself was torn between conflicting whispers. Irmo had planted the idea of new wonders that could surpass even Eru's imagination. Mandos had hinted at the inevitability of a changed destiny. And yet, Aule's love for the Allfather still burned within him. He recalled Eru's compassion when he first created the dwarfs. Could he truly turn his back on such grace? On this day, as sparks danced around the smoky cavern, a pair of voices intruded upon his craft. He glanced up to see two Maiar, one wearing a robe of midnight blue, the other clad in lighter gray. Both were known attendants in Aule's household, but the hints of agitation in their bearing spoke volumes. "My lord," began the one in midnight robes, voice trembling, "we have heard that some among the Valar may be forming new alliances. Do you stand with them? Or against them? Asked the other Maya, eyes flickering nervously over the line of newly forged warhammers. Owl set aside his hammer, the clang echoing through the cavern. I stand with caution, he responded, voice resonant but marked by weariness. This forging is for defense, not aggression. Let no one mistake that. The first Maya licked his lips as though parched for answers. If Irmo and Mandos truly aim to reform Ada, would you not welcome a new age for your dwarfs, free from old prejudices? The second Maya in grey added, but if the High King Manwe commands we preserve the status quo, are we not bound by Eru's design? Aule's eyes flashed with a mixture of grief and anger. This forging is my duty, for I sense a time of trial is near. As for Irmo, Mandos, or even Manwe, I will say this. I am no fool. I do not lightly cast aside the bond I share with the one who gave my dwarf's life. He heaved a deep breath. Yet, I am not blind. If the harmony of the Valar is truly broken, we must prepare for dire possibilities. He motioned toward the workshop, where dozens of dwarves hammered at red-hot steel and shaped monstrous constructs of war. Carry word to those who are loyal. Let them know Aule has not pledged himself to any rebellious cause, but neither will I be taken unawares if war descends upon us. While the Valar and their attendants moved in councils and quiet forging, the Knights of Feanor already took bold steps. Their stronghold, a hidden fortress carved into a ridge of black rock, echoed with the ring of steel and the murmurs of cold determination. J.r.r. stood on a ledge overlooking a vast subterranean arena. Torches burned in the depths below, illuminating lines of elven warriors sparring with lethal precision. Maglor lingered at his side, his face a tapestry of regret and resolve. The third figure was a mortal man, rugged yet refined, wearing the emblem of a distant kingdom. I was told you had news, said Maedhros, turning to the mortal. Speak quickly, my time is precious. The man bowed, though not deeply. Lord Maedhros, your sources have proven correct. I have spied upon Irmo's gatherings. He courts many Maya with promises of new dominion. Men are also being swayed with illusions, visions of golden cities and unending prosperity under the new order. They swarm to his banner like moths to flame. Maglor's eyes narrowed. And do you count yourself among them? The mortal gave a grim laugh. I serve no Valar's ambition. My loyalty is to you and your knights, for you have promised me vengeance against those who have spurned my house. Maedhros raised an eyebrow. Indeed, and so it shall be, if you carry your tasks well. Now, did you glean whether the rebellious Valar have singled out any potential threat for removal? The informant nodded gravely. They are cautious, but certain mortal rulers who remain staunchly loyal to Manwe are under scrutiny. Assassinations may already be in motion. Maglor let out a tense breath. The lines are being drawn more swiftly than we anticipated. If we do not act, we shall be left behind. Our vow is to stand at the pivot of fate, lest our enemies claim all advantage. Maedhros put a hand on his brother's shoulder. Yet we need not rush. Let Irmo and Mandos entangle themselves in illusions and doom. Let Manwe scramble to gather loyalists. Meanwhile, we target those who might check our rise. A single knife can do more than 1,000 swords if placed rightly. With that, the Knights of Feanor set in motion their plan. Under cover of night, small bands of these grim warriors fanned out, moving with lethal quiet. Their task, to intercept or assassinate key figures, be they mortal warlords or influential Maya, who threatened the Knight's ascendancy. Thus, even before the first open clash, the conflict claimed its earliest victims in hushed corridors and on deserted roads, leaving behind naught but fear and unanswered question. High atop Taniquetil, Manwë sat upon his throne in the airy council chamber. Vada stood at his right, her radiance a stark contrast to the oppressive uncertainty drifting through Valinor. Gathered were the mightiest among the faithful, Yavanna with eyes like emerald flame, Orome the huntsman in forest green garb, and Nienna weeping softly for the strife unfolding. A handful of Maya, those loyal beyond question, stood attentive at the perimeter. Manwë cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the lofty spires. You all sense it, a rift among us. Treachery festers, for certain powers among the Valar subvert the will of Eru. We must stand united before the darkness grows beyond our reach. Yavanna, sorrow shading her features, spoke quietly. Iramo is dear to me, for he tends all growing things in the realm of dreams. If he is among the traitors, what hope have we? Must we truly war against our own kin? Orome's voice rumbled low, like a beast poised to strike. If they be kin, they have forsaken that bond. I will hunt them to the ends of Arda if they threaten Iru's harmony. Nienna wiped her tears, voice tremulous yet firm. We must also remember pity. Should some among them repent, they should be given a path to return to Eru's grace. With a slow shake of his head, Manwë rose from his seat. All that is asked of us is readiness. The time to fight may yet come, but first we must gather those who remain true. Go forth. Call upon the elves who still revere the light of the trees, upon men who have not been lured by illusions, and upon Aule and his dwarfs, if they will stand with us. We must show them that all is not lost. He lifted his scepter, carved from crystal threads of starlight, and spoke with the full authority of the Elder King. Let the winds carry this summons across every vale and shore. We shall rally in Valmar within 3 turnings of the moon. By then, we shall see who stands with Eru and who stands against. His words echoed through the bright columns of Taniquetil, and a chill seemed to ripple through the watchers. Everyone knew that once the lines were declared, there would be no easy path back to peace. As the summons spread and secret murders continued, the watchers of the realm felt the shift in the very air. Storm clouds gathered more thickly. Nights seemed darker, haunted by the hush that often precedes cataclysm. Though no clarion call of open war had rung out, the manipulations were nearly complete. Soldiers, captains, Maya, and mortal kings found themselves courted by promises of glory or threatened by warnings of doom. In a single breath, one might feel the comforting breeze that once defined Valinor, mild and golden, rippling through the calm of an eternal land. In the next, that same wind carried portents of betrayal and whispered that the greatest powers of Arda were on the brink of sundered fellowship. All eyes turned toward the horizon, waiting for the inevitable, when dreamlike illusions would shatter under the weight of swords, spells, and the unleashed might of the Valar themselves. End of poem. Thus ends Part 2, immersed in the swirling tides of manipulation. Irmo and Mandos spin their webs of subtle coercion. The Knights of Feanor sharpen their secret blades, and the loyal Valar scramble to unite those who still cling to Eru's design. Conflict has not erupted in full, yet the realm stands one heartbeat away from violence unimaginable. Sign. A new and unsettling rumor spread through the hidden warrens of Valinor. A cult had formed among the forces opposed to Eru's will. Its members spoke a single name in reverent whispers: Mandos, the doomsman of the Valar, who stood beside Irmo in defiance of the divine order. Long had Mandos been keeper of the halls of the dead, pronouncer of doom upon elves and men alike. Yet now, in this fractured time, he had become a dark beacon for those seeking power or refuge from the burdens of fate. In a valley bathed in perpetual twilight, called Fanelond, for it was said to rest under a sky of ever-flickering stars, an assembly of strange devotees gathered. These were men and women who had once wandered Arda in aimless quest for meaning, souls disenchanted with the promises of the Valar who served Eru. Some were Maya, lesser spirits, drawn by Mandos's new purpose and intrigued by the chance to reshape destiny. At the valley's heart stood a monolithic shrine carved from black marble, its surface etched with runes that appeared to writhe when touched by starlight. A single brazier stood before it, fueled by an unearthly flame that shed no warmth, yet filled the air with a pungent tang reminiscent of metal and incense. An acolyte with silver hair and eyes dark as onyx lifted her arms, speaking in a trembling voice. "Attend, children of the night's doom. Behold the symbol of our Lord, whose voice shapes fate itself." All eyes turned to the shrine, where a statue of Mandos loomed, tall and solemn, hands folded as if in judgment. Though lifeless stone, its face seemed to watch them. A hush fell, broken only by the rustling of robes and the quiet sigh of the valley winds. "Repeat the words," intoned the acolyte. "Fate is ours to bind. By Mandos's word we rise. Eru's design shall break, and doom shall we devise." With each phrase, the cultists drew curved daggers across their palms, letting a trickle of blood fall into a small silver basin. It was an ancient sign of fealty, symbolizing their willingness to bleed for the new order. When the chant ended, the basin shimmered with dark liquid, reflecting flickers of the cold, unnatural flame. "Let this be our oath," cried the acolyte, voice echoing against the valley's rocky walls. "That we who gather here submit our fates to Mandos. We do not quiver beneath the old music. We forge a new doom, with or without Iluvatar's grace." A subdued cheer rose among the cultists, a sound tempered by fear and zeal. Many glanced at one another with a mixture of hope and dread, for they knew well the gravity of defying Eru. Yet they pressed on, drawn by a compulsion as mysterious as the hush of a starless night. From the edge of the crowd, a tall figure robed in midnight blue stepped forward. He wore a half-mask of polished obsidian that hid his features, and a subtle aura of dread and majesty clung to him. Rumor called him Anaris, once a Maya in the service of Mandos, now a self-proclaimed high priest of this cult, the keepers of Night's Doom. "Listen well," he said, voice low yet resonant. "For I bring tidings from our Lord Mandos himself. The moment of open strife draws near. We must gather armies, men, elves, and even dwarves, if we can sway them, to stand with the Doomsman against the tyranny of Eru's narrow plan." He paused, letting his gaze travel across the gathering. Mandos swallowed hard. He paused, standing. "Slowly, hear me. Those who stand with Mandos will find their destinies lifted from the shackles of old prophecy, and those who refuse will taste a doom not yet written, but far more terrible than any known to Arda." Anaros extended a hand toward the statue. The flame in the brazier surged, sending gnarled shadows dancing across the crowd. "We are not alone. From the hidden halls of Mandos's realm, spirits stir, elves who yearn for a second chance, and Maiar unchained from the fear of Eru. They will guide us, teach us, and stand at our side." A hush descended. Even the wind seemed to still in that moment. Several cultists exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of the dead returning to fight at Mandos's behest was at once thrilling and horrifying. Yet the allure of such power, control over fate itself, proved too strong to resist. Across the valley, beyond the central shrine, warriors drilled in makeshift camps. Banners adorned with a stylized emblem of Mandos, a black gauntlet gripping a half-broken circle, fluttered in the twilight breeze. These soldiers were a mixture of men and elves, some of whom had once served various lords but now found themselves enthralled by Mandos's promise of rewriting their destinies. In a wooden enclosure where the clang of steel on steel rang out, a tall elven captain led a training session. He wore an armband engraved with the same black gauntlet symbol. "Form ranks. Do you think the loyalists will quail at your show of force if you cannot march in step?" he barked, a sneer curling his lip. "Again, we prepare to serve the doomsman." Spears leveled, shield rims clashed, and the entire formation advanced. An uneasy synergy bound them. Fear of the dark vow they had taken, but also the strange exhilaration of defying the ancient songs. In some corners of the camp, zealots chanted lines from the cult's liturgy as they hammered swords on anvils. Others knelt in prayer to the statue of Mandos, forging silent pacts in the name of the Knight's doom. A mortal commander with a scarred face looked on, arms folded, and muttered to a companion, "I never thought I'd live to see the day men would kneel before a Valar other than Eru's chosen. But the old ways gave us neither glory nor power. If Mandos can free us from the decrees of doom, then let us march under his banner." His companion nodded, though her voice trembled. "Aye, though I fear a deeper darkness in this. May the gods, whatever gods remain, save us if we've chosen wrongly." Each eve, as the light drained from the sky, cultists convened for a ceremony they called the Night's Reckoning. Around the great brazier, they laid out intricately wrought lanterns containing violet flames. Accompanied by the low throb of drums carved from blackwood, a haunting chant filled the air. "Dread Mandos, keeper of shadows, we bend our knee in the hush of night, shape our fate to your design, and let the old music be undone." In those ceremonies, the air shimmered with strange illusions, hallucinations of new worlds, new realms, as if showing glimpses of an ardor unfettered by Eru's script. Some claimed these visions were sent by Ermo in alliance with Mandos. Others believed they were conjured by the restless spirits once bound to the halls of the dead. As the chanting reached a crescendo, warriors and acolytes alike held torches aloft, pledging themselves in body and soul to the doomsman. Enaros, presiding over each ritual, would accept their vows in the name of Mandos, smearing a coal-black paste across their foreheads, a sign that their spirits had been reclaimed from the old fate. Many left these ceremonies feeling a delirious combination of empowerment and terror. Though the cult's secrecy was formidable, word of it inevitably reached the loyal side. Messengers from the outskirts of Fannel carried accounts of bizarre rites and the rising host that pledged itself to Mandos. Whispers of a new power, unrestrained by the old laws, spread like wildfire among the free peoples who still clung to Eru and the loyal Valar. Upon the slopes of Tanaquil, Manwë received these tidings with a heavy heart. Varda stood at his side, her starlight eyes gleaming with sorrow. "So, Mandos has let his name be taken in vain, unless he endorses this cult himself," she said quietly, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. He was ever so close-lipped about the fates of elves and men, but to see him worshipped thus, this can only mean his rebellion has advanced far beyond illusions and secret councils. Manwë nodded gravely. "We have lost more than a brother this day. We have lost a cornerstone of Eru's harmony. Gather our faithful, Varda. Let them know that these false rites bring only deeper darkness. If Mandos has indeed instigated this worship, we must prepare for the worst, for armies swayed by his name will be neither faint nor few. In the twilight gardens of Lorien, Irmo felt a twinge of unease. He had not expected Mandos to so brazenly embrace open veneration. Their plan had always been more subtle: win the hearts of Arda's denizens with promises of shaping their own futures, not chain them in blatant cults. Yet the power Mandos wielded, an unspoken authority over mortal dread, seemed to be fueling this religious fervor. Irmo confronted his brother in the shadowy corner of a willow grove, where gently glowing blossoms marked their secret meeting place. "Mandals," he hissed, voice choked with quiet anger. "Have you truly sanctioned a cult in your own name? We spoke of guiding them, not enslaving them to idolatry." Mandos turned, his dark cloak shifting like a living shadow. "Do you fear the consequences, Irmo? The knights we gather, the armies we raise, they need more than whispered illusions. They need a symbol, a face, for the new doom we herald." Irmo's eyes flashed. "But this? They cut their palms in blood oaths. They kneel in worship, like zealots. Did we not vow that we ourselves would simply chart a new course for Arda, not become the objects of devotion?" A fleeting trace of sympathy touched Mandos's stony visage before it vanished. In uncertain times, masses cling to strong illusions. They require a figurehead for their cause, our cause, Irmo. Without it, they waver. An uneasy silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sigh of night blooms swaying. At length, Irmo exhaled. "Very well. But tread carefully, brother. If we press too far, Ira's wrath will be beyond anything Arda can withstand." Mandos's expression was unmoved. "Then let Arda quake, for all that was once bound must either shatter or break free." Though Mandos stood firm, doubt prickled in the hearts of others among the rebels. Some Maiar, who had initially joined in hope of liberating their gifts, now questioned the fervent worship demanded in Mandos' name. Over late-night fires and hushed conferences, these uneasy followers asked whether they had traded one form of bondage for another. One Maiar, slender and robed in teal, whispered to a companion in the hush of the cult's sprawling camp. "I sought to escape Eru's unchanging prophecy, yet now it seems we are asked to worship a new master. Is this truly freedom? Or have we walked into a darker prison?" The companion shrugged, eyes hollow with fatigue. "We do not have the luxury of turning back, friend. The gate stands behind us, and the watchers at its threshold show no mercy to traitors. Better to endure under Mandos's gaze than to face the wrath of Eru for having strayed." Their words, carried in low murmurs, echoed the unease felt by many. Yet the momentum of the cult, buoyed by extravagant rites, chilling demonstrations of power, and Mandos's grim promises, pressed them onward. Slowly but inexorably, a new dread faith rippled across the armies of the rebellious Valar. So it was that a swirling mass of enthralled warriors, fearful acolytes, and cunning leaders came together under Mandos's banner, forging a roiling tide of devotion and ambition that threatened to crash upon the faithful of Arda. Hidden within the half-lit canyons of Fanalond, they strengthened their rituals and sharpened their swords, waiting for the fateful day when Irmo and Mandos would call upon them to unleash their might. Meanwhile, Manwë and his allies saw the writing on the wall. Even Aule, forging unceasingly in his hidden forges, heard rumor of the cult and felt the old bond of brotherhood fray. Torn between love for Arda and fear of the doom Mandos pronounced, he pressed the dwarves to greater efforts, forging weapons and war machines that might one day stand against a power fueled by devoted worship. And in the darkest corridors of the Knights of Feanor's stronghold, Maedhros and Maglor gleaned the advantage. "Let Mandos stoke the fires of faith," Maedhros muttered, eyes glinting with renewed intensity. "Chaos only helps our knives find the hearts of our enemies." The knights quietly continued their clandestine assassinations, thinning out potential rivals among both the loyalists and the cult. Unwilling to let any side become too strong, Maedhros Thus ends Part 3, with the cult of Knights Doom swelling its ranks in worship of Mandos. Open devotion has raised the stakes far beyond stealth and subtlety. Now the armies on both sides sense that the final lines are drawn in blood and fervor, preparing for an inevitable conflict that could reshape Arda forever. Dark clouds gathered, like an omen, above the plains that stretched between the rebellious strongholds and the seats of loyal power. Whispers of war had long lingered in corners and corridors, but now they burst into open wind. The hush of expectation that had enshrouded Valinor shivered, and in its place came the first distinct rumblings of battle. Armies on either side, newly sworn or torn by doubt, converged in a land soon to be known for sorrow. Atu Telmor. In the hidden gardens of Lorien, Urmo walked among his gathered retinue. Gone were the gentle illusions meant only to delight and comfort. Now, illusions were sharpened into weapons. Scores of Maiar who had pledged themselves to Urmo stood ready, bearing subtle enchantments and illusions woven into their garments. Armored elves, drawn by dreams of a remade world, waited in a nervous throng at the garden's edges. Even men, enthralled by the promise of shaping their own destiny, had journeyed from beyond the mountains to serve under the banner of the Dream Lord, who, as the battles would indicate, here and there, in hushed voices, these forces murmured about the might of Mandos, the newly beloved and feared Doomsman, who had been exalted by a vast cult. Although Urmo winced at the idea of open worship of any Valar, he recognized the value of having a fervent host on their side. With the combined strength of illusions and dark devotion, the rebellious Valar had become a threat that the loyalists could no longer ignore. Urmo turned to a lean figure by his side, a Maiar clad in swirling shadows. "Tell me, has there been word from Mandos' cult?" The Maiar bowed. "They have secured the Valley of Faneland, my lord. But some say they grow too bold. There are rumors that even we do not know the full extent of their powers. They draw new recruits daily." Urmo's jaw clenched. Inwardly, he worried Mandos had unleashed a force that could prove uncontrollable. Outwardly, he exhaled slowly and replied, "Let us see them harness that fervor when the time comes. For now, gather our kin. We march at dawn." Meanwhile, in a secret fortress carved into bleak stone, the Knights of Feanor gathered. Maedhros, tall and formidable, surveyed his warriors with a gaze filled with cold fire. Word had reached them that the armies of both loyalties were on the move. This was an opportunity the Knights could not ignore, nor would they let it slip away. "My brothers," Maedhros said in a quiet but resonant tone, "we stand on the brink of a cataclysm. The Valar wage war among themselves, and in that chaos, we reclaim our destiny." A handful of knights exchanged restless looks. One younger elf questioned, "But if Mandos' cult grows too strong, won't they overshadow our designs? Perhaps we should ally more openly with Urmo to secure our place." Maedhros' expression twisted in distaste. "No, I will not kneel to false gods. Our father would scorn us if we traded one form of subjugation for another. We fight for our own name, forging the future as we choose." He paused, his countenance grim. "And if that means stabbing either side in the back, so be it." A hush followed. Beside him, Maglor shifted uneasily. His musical gifts once brought solace to many, yet now guilt weighed on him like a tangible chain. "Too much blood has already been spilled by our house," he murmured. "Yet I cannot see another path. If we do nothing, we will be swept aside." Maedhros reached out and clasped his brother's shoulder. "Then it is decided. Let the armies collide, and we shall be as a blade in the dark, cutting away any who threaten the ascendancy of the Knights of Feanor." Under the high arches of Valmar, city of bells and shimmering towers, the loyal Valar and their allies assembled. Manwë, clad in regal robes of cloud white, surveyed the throng from a marble balcony. Gathered below, in the central courtyard, stood hosts of elves who still adored the memory of the two trees, ranks of men who had refused bribes or illusions, and the dwarfs of Aule, ever sturdy in body and unbroken in spirit. Manwë raised a hand, and a hush fell. "Children of Eru," he began in a sonorous voice, "the time for secrecy has passed. Let all know that our brethren Ilmo and Mandos have turned from the music that shaped Arda. They lure many to their cause. We stand in defense of the Creator's design, to preserve what remains of harmony." A stirring in the crowd parted to reveal Erone, a proud elven captain of the Noldor who had sided with the Loyalists. Draped in armor that gleamed like starlight, she ascended the steps to Manwë's side. In a clear, unwavering voice, Erone declared, "Though the house of Feanor is sundered by many tragedies, not all of us cling to oaths of old. My people, once led astray, now see the folly of further rebellion. We stand with Eru and his appointed Valar." Her eyes flashed. "Grant us your blessing, Lord Manwë, that we might carry the fight to the traitors and, if need be, die defending the true order of the world." Manwë extended his hand over Eron's bowed head. "Your courage will be remembered in the high places of Tanaquetil, Eron of the Noldor. Go forth with the wind at your back." The crowd erupted in a resonant cry, an odd mixture of hope and fear. The loyal armies were formidable, but haunted by dread of warring against Valar. They marched out soon after, banners raised high, a shimmering wave of steel and resolution. Southwest of Valmar lay Halthirion, a broad plain ringed by gentle hills and silver streams. Once peaceful farmland, it now turned into a field of muster. Irmo's host arrived first, illusions shaping the morning light into eerie patterns. Helmets and breastplates caught flickers of silver and purple, as though part of a dreamlike tapestry. Shortly after, the loyal ranks appeared from the north, their armor glinting beneath the pale sun. At their head strode Erone, the wind playing in her raven-black hair, her posture unyielding. Behind her marched elves in tight formation, men bearing tall spears, and dwarves with heavy axes. Across the rolling grass, Irmo's forces spread out, forming a spectral mirror of the loyal lines. A hush fell, as if the world itself held its breath. Then, heralds on both sides stepped forward. One, representing the Loyalists, lifted a gleaming trumpet to his lips. "By the will of Manwë, High King of the Valar, we ask that Irmo, Mandos, and any who rebel surrender," he called, voice strained. "Cease this folly and return to Eru's grace, or face the wrath of Arda's true guardians." From Irmo's side, a tall Maiar answered, "Your so-called guardians have shackled Arda to old destinies. We claim our right to shape new paths, be they dream or doom." Both lines shifted. Warriors eyed each other with uncertain dread. Then, with a tremor that ran through the very air, illusions roiled. Flickering shapes of phantom beasts lunged at the loyal troops, causing confusion in the ranks. The call of horns rang out on both sides. Thus, the first blow of open conflict fell. Amid the chaos, Irmo himself stepped to the forefront, robed in shimmering fabric that shifted like a living hallucination. With a gesture, he sent waves of haunting illusions rippling through the loyal lines. Some elves saw monstrous wraiths rising from the earth. Men stumbled, sure they faced a fiery chasm. Dwarves found themselves assaulted by images of gnarled caves collapsing overhead. A ripple of panic spread. Yet Erone, seeing the illusions for what they were, rallied her archers. "Steady! The Dream Lord aims to break our spirit. Stand firm. and let your hearts see truth." Her voice cut through the phantasms, and the loyal ranks began to push forward once more. Arrows whistled, felling the front ranks of Irmo's mortal followers. A cry of dismay rose from the rebellious side, but the illusions continued to swirl, shaping the battlefield into a shifting mosaic of terror and wonder. From the southwestern flank, a group of Irmo's elite Maya and elven champions pushed aggressively forward. At their head strode Calathea, an elf of proud bearing who had once followed Feanor, but now sided with the Dreamlord. His face, once gentle, was twisted by the illusions fueling his fervor. Suddenly, Eirone found herself crossing blades with Calathea near a ridge. Their duel was a clash of steel and magic, Calathea's sword wreathed in coruscating illusions, Eirone's blade ringing with defiant clarity. Around them, loyal elves pressed in, trying to bolster Eirone, but Calathea's illusions disoriented her allies, forcing them to reel back. Eirone fought desperately, steps graceful yet bearing the desperation of a cornered hawk. After a flurry of blows, she swung her sword in a desperate arc, catching Calathea's guard. He staggered, just as a swirl of illusions blazed around him, warping her next strike. He barely managed. Too late, Eirone realized a horrifying shift in her surroundings. Out of the illusory haze, another figure lunged into the fray. Eldenar, a renowned loyalist elf and an old friend of Eirone's who had been trying to shield her flank. He'd been cast into the illusions, and in the confusion, Eirone's blade found him, not Calathea. The hush seemed to descend as Eldenar gasped, eyes wide with surprise and agony. Eirone froze in horror, withdrawing her sword as if it burned her hands. Eldenar sank to his knees, blood staining the grass. Every eye turned to her. "No, no, Eldenar!" Eirone cried, voice breaking. Around them, the battle churned on, heedless of her sudden despair. Eldenar tried to speak, breath ragged. His last breath caught in his throat, and he fell silent, eyes dimming like lamps at sunrise. Erin dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Sorrow mingled with fury as she held him, trembling. Then, a thunderous roar of conflict yanked her back to reality. As the dreadful moment sank into the ruinous tapestry of war, Irmo's illusions intensified, causing the loyal lines to fragment. The cultists of Mandos, though few in number at Haltherion, joined from one flank, chanting invocations to the Doomsman and fueling their swords with an uncanny vigor. Yet the loyalist forces remained formidable. With Manwë's winds at their backs, sections of their line regrouped. Dwarves under Aula's banner hammered the traitorous Maya with iron discipline, unmoved by illusions they could not see clearly, but recognized as false. Men, stirred by oaths of loyalty, reformed ranks with surprising resilience. Elves, though shaken by loss and deception, clung to each other and pressed onward. Eiron rose, consumed by grief and a fierce resolve. She rallied the loyal elves, unleashing a barrage of arrows that pierced the illusions, striking down multiple foes. Calathea, seeing a new determination spark in her eyes, retreated under the cover of Irmo's illusions, cursing that his plan to shatter morale had not undone them entirely. As midday passed into a fiery sunset, the fighting grew frenzied. Both sides inflicted heavy losses, the field strewn with bodies of elves and men. Yet neither could claim victory. At last Irmo sounded a retreat, unwilling to risk total annihilation of his forces. Vanishing into conjured mists, they left the battered loyalists behind in the blood-stained fields of Haltherion. Shaken, exhausted, and mourning their dead, Manwë's armies tended to the wounded. Eirone knelt beside Eldenar's still form, tears carving silent paths along her cheeks. She pressed a trembling kiss to his brow, recalling his final words. If only the light of Valinor, could guide us home. In that moment, her grief crystallized into a new resolve. No matter the cost, she would oppose the Valar, who had brought such sorrow to their kin. Turning to her troops, she raised Eldanar's sword, voice cracking but determined. "We cannot falter now. We fight not only for ourselves, but for the countless souls consumed by this unnatural strife." The loyal host lifted a ragged cheer, echoing with sorrow and defiance. A thick hush settled over the battlefield as the last rays of sun slid below the horizon. They would mourn tonight, but the war was only beginning. Far from the carnage, Mandos and Ermo conferred in the gloom of Lorien's hidden recesses. Though their forces had not seized a decisive victory, the battle signaled that open conflict could not be turned aside. A rare shadow flitted across Ermo's face. He had witnessed the illusion's toll on the battlefield. The accidental slaying of Eldanar by friendly blade weighed heavily upon him, a grim testament to how illusions could twist even the most valiant hearts against each other. Mandos was less moved, his voice as cool as a winter night. "Sacrifices are inevitable, Irmo. Do not weaken. We have only just begun to unravel Irmo's old tapestry." Still, a flicker of doubt lingered in Irmo's gaze. He said nothing, forcing himself to remember the conviction that had led him here, the dream of a new Ardor, unconstrained by predestined fate. Ardor still stole softly back, finding Ardor his home. Back among the Knights of Feanor, the news of the clash stirred excitement. Scouts reported the heavy losses on both sides. Maedhros remained inscrutable, contemplating how best to exploit the next engagement, while Maglor's quiet lament rose through the fortress halls, a mournful song echoing the mounting sorrow of Ardor. Thus concludes Part 4, a harsh and tragic taste of open war. A faint mist drifted across the blood-stained plains of Halthirion in the wake of the recent battle. The air bore the scent of churned earth and trampled grass, mingled with the sorrow that followed the loss of so many brave souls. In distant corners of the field, grieving elves sang laments for the fallen, their voices echoing over the corpse-laden ground. Daylight offered no comfort, for it merely illuminated the horrors wrought by illusions and steel. Word of the conflict's outcome spread quickly. Ermo had withdrawn, his illusions unraveling in the face of a dogged loyalist's stand, yet the rebel forces had inflicted a grievous toll. Back in Valmont, where the loyal armies now took grim stock of the war's cost, an air of tension and uncertainty settled like a heavy cloak. Leaders gathered beneath the arches of that radiant city, their faces etched with weariness and concern. Even as the wounded were tended and the dead laid to rest, a flurry of reports arrived at Manwë's council. Some spoke of raids on outlying hamlets, rebel scouts pillaging supplies or conscripting frightened villagers. Others told of the cult of Night's doom, swarming through hidden roads, urging men and elves alike to swear devotion to Mandos. Less common, yet more alarming, were rumors that the Knights of Feanor had been spotted skulking near the aftermath of the battle, though no one knew whose side they truly favored. Manwë, perched upon a high dais in the council chamber, wore an expression of somber resolve. Gathered below him stood Vardar, Yavanna, and a small circle of Maiar captains, along with a handful of mortal envoys. All were uneasy. The bright stone pillars of Valmar's seat of authority seemed to carry distant echoes of war, as though the city itself trembled. "We can ill afford to sit idle," Manwë declared, his voice resonating through the chamber. Ermo and Mandos are not deterred by the cost of lives. Each day they tighten their hold on the hearts of those who crave a world beyond Eru's design. We must counter their illusions, speak truth where they sow confusion. Vardar nodded, her bearing regal but her eyes carrying the weight of grief. "I shall redouble my watch upon the stars. she replied. They are not only lights, but guides of hope, reminders of the splendor once shared by all. Let our people see them and recall that Eru's music is not yet undone. Yavanna, sorrow lingering in her gaze, ventured, "We must also bring the free folk together, elves, men, even dwarfs, so they do not waver in isolation. If we fail to unite them under a common banner, the rebels will erode their resolve." Manwë nodded. "So be it. Spread the word to the corners of Arda, where loyalty endures. Let them know we gather what strength remains." Though the council murmured assent, an undertow of uncertainty gnawed at each heart. For the first time since Melkor's fall, it seemed the Valar themselves might unleash havoc that could dwarf even the old wars. In a shaded courtyard within Valmar, Éowyn of the Noldor wrestled with her grief. The memory of Eldenar's final breath haunted her, replaying every time she closed her eyes. Illusions had robbed them both of clarity in that frantic clash, and she had, unintentionally, struck him down. Worse, she remembered his final words. "Éowyn, do not falter. Forgive me if only the light of Valnor could guide us home." Leaning against a low wall of sun-warmed stone, she stared out over the city's spires. "Did I fail you, Eldenor?" she whispered, a tremor in her voice. "Your faith in me was absolute, and now you lie among the fallen." A soft footfall behind her prompted a slight turn of her head. An elven attendant approached, bowing respectfully. "My lady," he said, voice gentle, "Lord Manwë has summoned a new council of captains. Your presence is requested." She inhaled, steeling herself. "Very well. Tell him I come." As the attendant departed, Aroni lingered a moment, letting a faint breeze caress her face. She thought of the future battles that likely awaited them, and of the illusions Irmo would wield again. Eldenar's death stood as a grim reminder that this war would not be won by swords alone. Many hearts would break, and perhaps, she feared, her own, again and again. While loyalist leaders organized, another council took shape amid the gloom of Lorien. The once tranquil gardens were shadowed by drooping trees, whose leaves emitted only a muted glow. Irmo stood at the edge of a stone pavilion, arms folded, eyes scanning a force of rebels. Maiar, elves, and men, who were still bandaging wounds from the last conflict. Some eyes gleamed with renewed zeal, others with sullen doubt. Mandos materialized from the shadows, robed in black and grey. "We must not tarry," he said in his resonant, measured tone. "Our advantage lies in keeping the loyalists off balance, sowing fear through illusions and the gravity of doom. Already they sense the hopelessness of defying us, but we must press further." Éomer did not immediately respond. Though his face remained serene, a faint tension creased his brow. The illusions he had conjured at Halthirion had yielded fearsome results, yet also a tragic, unintended slaying among the loyal ranks. Something in him recoiled at the recollection. At last he spoke. "Manwë's lines still hold. We cannot crush them easily, not while they rally under the star glow of Vada or call upon the bold hearts of the dwarves. This war could bleed us as much as them." Mandos's gaze flicked over Irmo, as if weighing his resolve. "Do not weaken," he whispered, voice cold. "We have come too far to relinquish our claim on Arda's fate. If illusions falter, there are other ways. Our cult stands ready, devout warriors, forging pacts in my name. Let them be unleashed." Irmo nodded slowly, remaining silent as Mandos turned and departed. In his heart, Irmo questioned whether they truly shaped a grand new future, or simply repeated the tragedies of past rebellions in a fresh guise. Still, doubt offered no sanctuary now. The course they had set compelled him forward. Deep beneath the earth, Aula's forges blazed with furious heat. Hammers rang out as dwarves, stalwart and tireless, shaped weapons of uncanny craftsmanship. Among the clang and hiss of steel, Aula himself walked, face drawn into deep lines of care. Neither rebellious nor openly in league with Manwë, he had tried to maintain a semblance of neutrality, forging armaments to protect his people should the war spill irrevocably into his domain. Before a colossal anvil stood a dwarf lord clad in fine mail. "My lord Aule," he said, stroking a newly forged war axe. "Many among us ask, shall we fight for the loyal Valar or remain hidden until the storm passes? Rumors claim Irmo's illusions can blind entire armies, and Mandos's cult is rumored to dispatch any who resist them." Aule paused, gazing into the dwarf lord's determined eyes. The weight of fatherly love for his children pressed upon him. Each dwarf was a precious reflection of his craft, a living embodiment of his devotion to creation. Yet the fate of Arda hung in the balance. At last, Orly answered with a weary sigh. "I sense that the war will come to us, whether we hide or march out to meet it. We are too bound to the fate of Arda to stand aside." He paused, eyes flickering with a subdued flame. "Arm yourselves. I must still speak with Manwë, for old ties cannot be broken so easily. But if Mandos's wrath turns upon us, we shall not be found defenseless." Thus the dwarves girded for a conflict they had never sought. Tunnels that once echoed with song and laughter now resounded with the clamor of forging steel and the tense hush of warriors preparing for war. Far from the forges of Aule, a ragged band of knights of Feanor slunk through the edges of Valmar under cover of night. Cloaked and hooded, they blended with the shadows near the city's outlying districts. Maedhros led them, his tall figure unmistakable even in darkness, one arm ever poised near the hilt of his blade. He turned to Maglor, who followed in silence. "We'll slip into the Loyalists' supply caches," Maedhros whispered, "and see what we can glean. They hoard resources for the next engagement. If we can sabotage their stores, we weaken their readiness." Maglor nodded, though a sorrowful line tugged at his mouth. "We once stood among these very elves, Manwë's allies. Would Feanor have truly wanted us to sabotage them?" Maedhros's eyes flashed. Feanor wanted freedom. Freedom from the constraints of others' wills. This war is a chance to shape our own fate, to avoid kneeling to any Valar's new tyranny. If the Loyalists prevail, we lose that chance. If Irmo and Mandos prevail, we may fare no better. Thus we strike at both sides. They advanced into one of Valmar's lesser-used gates, the guard outposts momentarily distracted by a disturbance at the far wall. The knights seized the moment to slip inside, footsteps silent as a cat's in a moonlit alley. Their aim, to create confusion, sow mistrust. Anything that might give the Knights of Feanor an upper hand in a conflict that threatened to consume them all. On the second day after the Haltharian battle, an unexpected summons reached Manwë. Hermo sought a parley. After a hurried council, Manwë agreed to meet in the open foothills west of Valmar, under a banner of temporary truce. At midday, under a canopy of pale sunlight, the two Valar faced each other across a small clearing. Irmo was clad in swirling robes, shifting color like a prism, his face drawn and tired. Beside him stood a pair of Maiar guards. On Manwë's flank, Vardar stood watchful, along with Aeron and a few loyal captains. Manwë's voice echoed in the hush. "Brother, you have led many astray. Our realm bleeds under illusions and false promises. For what purpose? Spencer declared that the mark had finally come. Brighter and faster the scroll below. Elmo's gaze flickered with a glimmer of regret. I believed we could expand the vision of Arda, not be caged by it. Elmo's script seemed too narrow, too final. But perhaps we ventured farther than we ought. I wondered if it was only fantasy, or if it was real. Varda stepped forward, eyes bright as stars. Then cease this madness, Irmo. Mandos fosters worship in his name, twisting your cause into an abomination. Rejoin us. Help us restore what was lost before it's too late. For a heartbeat, Irmo appeared to waver. Memories of peaceful nights in Lorien, of tending dreams that soothed hearts, flickered in his expression. But another memory, of alliances forged in secrecy, of Mandos's grim vow, stirred him. I cannot, he whispered. Too many have pinned their hopes on a new order. I will not abandon them to face Eru's wrath alone. A weighty silence blanketed the clearing. Manwë felt an ache within his being, for he remembered Eormor's gentle counsel through many past ages. At length he raised his head. Then no peace can come from this. Should you press war, we cannot stand aside. Irmo inclined his head, voice hushed. Nor shall we. No further words were exchanged. The parley ended, each side turning away with the heavy knowledge that this conflict would only escalate. Elrond's hand shook upon the hilt of her sword, as though she felt the hope of a peaceful resolution slip through her fingers like wind-blown ash. That night, Valmar lay uneasy beneath a moon that seemed too pale, too silent. The Knights of Feanor crept through hidden corners, sowing small seeds of sabotage. A burning storehouse here, a stolen cache of arrows there. Loyalist scouts captured a few cultists of Mandos in the low foothills, discovering that the rebels had stockpiled arcane implements rumored to bind spirits. Meanwhile, the dwarves fortified their underground domain, forging cunning locks and valves to flood corridors if intruders came. In Lorien, Irmo's illusions continued to swirl, but for the first time they felt half-hearted, as though the Dream Lord's conviction faltered. The cult of Mandos continued to swell, fueled by unwavering belief in their doomsman. Mandos himself, cold and resolute, prepared to unleash new horrors upon the Loyalists. His followers whispered that soon the dread judgment would descend, not from Eru's hand, but from Mandos's own forging of doom. A sorrowful hush settled over the realm, an almost tangible sense that all were perched on the brink of a final descent. The illusions grew darker, the war machines grew deadlier. Hearts were more desperate than ever before. Neither side could quite see a clear path to victory, nor any path to peace. Even the stars overhead seemed dimmer, as though afraid to shine too brightly upon a world so thoroughly overshadowed by betrayal. And in that dim starlight, Arda braced itself for the next onslaught, the next heartbreak, and the next bitter triumph that would only lead further down the road of ruin. Thus ends Part 5, a time of uneasy suspicion and fleeting hopes for negotiation. Mandos tightens his cult's grip, Irmo grapples with doubt, the Loyalists scramble to unify, and the Knights of Feanor seize the chaos to pursue their own designs. An ominous stillness pervades, leaving none unscathed, and thunderous strife, leaving none unscathed. Dusk settled over Valinor like a veil of ash, masking the once radiant plains in a half-light fraught with ill omen. The clash at Halthirion and the many smaller skirmishes across the realm had splintered hopes of a swift resolution. Now, as if feeling the world itself tremble under the weight of approaching doom, both Loyalists and rebels drew their lines with finality. Along the margins of Lorien's gardens, the once peaceful groves were choked by twisting illusions. Trees stood with drooping boughs whose leaves sported eerie patterns of violet and black, as though tainted by the doubt festering in Irmo's own heart. j.r.r. soldiers patrolled the leaf-strewn paths, bearing torches lit with pale blue flame, scanning the night for loyalist scouts or stealthy assassins from the Knights of Feanor. Irmo's once gentle demeanor now flickered between resolve and reluctant dread. In the perfumed air of a moonlit clearing, he consulted with Mandos beneath the canopy of a twisted willow whose bark seemed carved from obsidian. Around them, grim-faced captains waited, many wearing the emblem of Knight's Doom, Mandos's cult. Mandos, robed in sable, spoke in low, resonant tones. Our next move must be decisive. The illusions rattle them, but illusions alone cannot break their will. We must unleash the full measure of our might. Irmo nodded, though his gaze strayed among the silent watchers. Manwë's host yet stands. Varda's starlight heartens them, and they persist beyond all reason. This war is not only armies clashing, it has become a test of belief. He lowered his voice. And belief is not so easily broken. Mandos's eyes gleamed in the dimness. Yet break them we must, or be destroyed by Eru's wrath. You know well that if we falter now, there will be no mercy. A hush followed his pronouncement, unbroken until Anaris, the high priest of the Knight's Doom, stepped forward, black robes swirling around his tall frame. My lord Mandos, the cult awaits your command. Our worshippers stand ready to harness the dread energies you bestow. He bowed deeply, and shadows seemed to flicker about him. Only speak the word. Irmo repressed a shiver at the fervor in Anaris's voice. For all his commitment to remaking the world, he had never sought to stand as an object of worship. Yet Mandos's acceptance of devotion had gathered a fearsome zeal that might tip the scales in their favor, or unleash horrors beyond his imagining. Aye, prepare them, Mandos said, voice measured. We move before the next moon's turning. Let Irmo's illusions and my cult's fervor converge to strike a blow from which Manwë cannot recover. In Valmar, the atmosphere felt no lighter. Manwë's tower lights gleamed through the twilight, a beacon for those who yet clung to Eru's will. Beyond the city walls, tents sprawled across a wide plateau. Loyalist forces camped there in a patchwork of mortal, elven, and dwarven contingents. At the base of Manwë's tower, Erwin stood among a small council. She wore a new scar from recent skirmishes with Irmo's illusions, and the pain in her eyes surpassed the mere ache of wounds. Beside her stood two mortal captains, both battered from the earlier battles, and a lone dwarf lord who had journeyed from Owl's forges. We've lost entire outposts along the southwestern frontier, one captain said, voice filled with exhaustion. Mandos's cult has pressed in with unearthly fervor. They do not fear death, they seem to embrace it. The dwarf lord, tusked beard braided with silver links, uttered a gravelly oath. And we see signs of sabotage in the tunnels. Some dwarves gone missing. Whether coerced or turned traitor, I cannot say. My people stand with Ole, but fear spreads swiftly in the dark. Iro's expression hardened. Each new tragedy struck her heart like a hammer on fragile glass. We cannot fight despair with steel alone. Mandos's cult wields intimidation like a blade. We must give our allies something more potent than illusions. An unshakable cause. She pressed a hand to the hilt of Eldenar's sword, her fallen friend's legacy. If we fail, all of Arda might crumble. The second mortal captain, gaunt with worry, nodded. Lord Manwë calls a great muster of the faithful within 3 days. We will gather whatever strength we can, Though how we hope to match the might of Valar turned against us, I do not know. Eros' mind drifted to the memory of Eldenar's final words, urging her not to falter. She clenched her fists. We will do more than match them. We will show the rebellious Valar that Eru's love has not dimmed. If they have chosen darkness, it shall not cloak the entire world. Hidden within the labyrinth of lesser streets and storehouses that surrounded Valmar's grand architecture, the Knights of Feanor moved like phantoms. They had grown skilled at evading loyalist patrols, while avoiding direct confrontation with Mandos's fanatics. True to their own cause, they would commit to neither side, preferring to exploit the chaos for their advantage. In a crumbling courtyard, Maedhros conferred with his lieutenants around a makeshift table. Moonlight glinted off the metal studs in his leather tunic, accentuating the hardened lines of his face. Maglor lingered to the side, half absent, seemingly absorbed in composing a soft lament for the countless dead. Our scouts report that Ermo and Mandos are planning a major offensive, Maedhros said in a hushed tone. Manwë knows it. He gathers his forces to meet them. That will be the pivotal battle of this war. A younger knight, eyes bright with ambition, leaned forward. Then, do we side with neither, as before? Or do we strike one side at the crucial moment? Patience, Maedhros replied. We must appear at the final confrontation on our terms. Let them exhaust each other. When the tide teeters, we shall make our move and claim the spoils. Maglor's voice drifted like a sorrowful wind. Your talk of spoils troubles me, brother. This war rips the very soul from our people. The illusions, the cult, the storms. There may be nothing left to claim if this continues. Maedhros's eyes flicked with a glimmer of empathy, but they quickly hardened again. We made an oath once. We cannot serve another's vow. We must carve our own path, or be swept into oblivion. Would you rather kneel to Mandos as he forges a new doom, or Manwë, who calls down Eru's wrath on all dissent? Maglor had no answer. The Knights of Feanor had traversed so many grey shades of loyalty and betrayal, it seemed there was no untainted cause left for them. And yet, standing idle felt like an even greater betrayal of themselves and of a world unraveling at the seams. True to Mandos's word, the rebellion struck sooner than expected. It began with ominous rumblings of thunder beneath a starless sky. Winds howled across the plains, twisting in unnatural gales. Lightning forked overhead, tinted a sickly greenish hue. From the battered ramparts of Valmar, loyalist centuries looked on in dread. Some murmured that even nature itself recoiled from the war between gods. Then, from the southwestern horizon, phantom armies appeared, as if from nowhere. Illusion woven so intricately that watchers found it impossible to tell real foes from apparitions. Stag-headed beasts of swirling mist charged across the plain, scattering the first lines of loyal scouts. Overhead, the sky rippled with shapes of monstrous wings, illusions that shrieked like banshees. Trumpets blared in Valmar. The call to arms resounded through the city. Under Manwë's direction, a host of elves, men, and dwarfs marched out, determined to hold the line against the swirling illusions. Leading them rode Erone, spear shining under the eerie flashes of lightning. She recited Eldenar's name, carrying his memory as a shield against the fear creeping into every mind. In the midst of the illusions, the cult of Mandos advanced with cold precision. Human soldiers and elven renegades brandished weapons etched with black runes, their eyes glossy with fanatic conviction. At their head strode Anaros, chanting in a guttural tongue. Knight's doom come forth, fate bows to none but we. Let the loyal tremble, for Mandos is their destiny. Bolts of coruscating darkness leapt from his staff, colliding with the loyal lines. Soldiers collapsed, writhing in nightmares spun into physical form. Iron's elves tried to counter with arrows, but illusions confused their aims, and real cult warriors mingled with phantom shapes, making each target uncertain. As chaos spread, Mandos himself appeared on the battlefield, a towering, cloaked figure whose presence seemed to still the very wind. The illusions parted like a tide around him. A hush fell over friend and foe alike as the doomsman raised one pale hand. The black swirl of his cloak caught the glint of lightning, and many a loyal soldier quailed under his silent gaze. Sick. Then, in a voice as inexorable as time, Mandos proclaimed, "Doom is upon you, children of Eru. Will you yield your fates willingly, or must they be wrested from your dying grasp?" A tremor ran through the loyal ranks. Some even sagged to their knees, overwhelmed by the sense of finality in Mandos's words. Irene shouted encouragement, her voice straining to rally her troops, but the despair of Mandos's presence cut deep. Just as a wave of panic threatened to swallow the loyal line, a rolling thunderclap tore across the heavens. The swirling illusions of Irmo faltered momentarily, revealing the rebellious host in stark clarity. It was as if some deeper power responded to Mandos's challenge, shaking the very foundation of Arda. Manwe's voice rose from the far side of the field, carried on the sudden gale. "Mandos, you speak of doom, but Eru alone weaves the final thread. Would you cast yourself above the one who shaped us all?" Lightning traced a jagged path through the roiling clouds, illuminating Manwe atop a rise. Regal in his bearing, he glowed faintly with a swirling aura of wind and light, a testament to his authority as Elder King of the Valar. At his side stood Vada, eyes burning with starlight. Behind them, loyalist reinforcements poured forth, brandishing new weapons blessed by Aula. Mandos's cloak billowed in the wind, but he did not flinch. "Manwe, your fealty binds you to a pattern that no longer serves. I claim dominion over what once was Eros alone, the doom of Arda. Let the strong survive in the realm we forge, and let the weak vanish like echoes in the void." A great clamor erupted as the two sides clashed in earnest. Irmo's illusions recoiled like wounded animals, only to renew their assault at Irmo's command. Vines of living nightmare coiled around the loyal forward ranks, and dissonant wails pulsed in the air. At the same time, Vada summoned starry lights that cut through the gloom, banishing illusions and emboldening the hearts of those who stood with her. The field erupted in a tapestry of swirling darkness and sudden brilliance, illusions collapsing into reality where starlight touched them. From the east thundered the sound of metal upon metal. Dwarves under Aule's banner, brandishing newly forged war machines that roared with mechanical fury. Towers of iron advanced on spiked wheels, belching plumes of steam and molten slag. Great crossbows, the size of siege engines, launched massive bolts, crackling with runic power. Their combined might battered the illusions, forcing Mandos's cult to yield ground. Storm mages strained to spoil the new arrivals. She looked around and instantly recognized him. Though Aule himself had not declared open allegiance, his forging had unmistakably armed the loyal side. Whispers said he had spoken privately with Manwe, conceding that neutrality was impossible, while rebellion threatened to unmake Arda's very essence. Amid the chaos, Irone caught sight of Irmo standing upon a jagged outcrop. His eyes were fixed on the swirling illusions, some flickering uncertainly, as though part of him hesitated. She felt a pang of empathy for the Dream Lord who had once nurtured Arda's gentlest wonders. Yet that moment of reflection nearly cost her life. cultists rushed her flank, and only swift reflex saved her. Grimly, she rejoined the fray, determined to see the struggle through. As the battle raged, both armies realized this conflict would likely end in a single, cataclysmic confrontation. Wounds piled upon wounds, illusions and starlight warred for every patch of ground. Even the Knights of Feanor arrived in the distance, observed by sharp-eyed scouts, but whether to join or betray either side remained uncertain. Desperation hung thick, for all recognized that if this engagement proved inconclusive, Arda itself might be torn asunder. Mandos could taste victory, yet Manwë stood fast. Irmo's illusions battered the loyal lines, yet Varda's starlight refused to yield. And in the thunderous crescendo of war, it felt as though the very breath of Eru hovered on the brink, unseen but potent, ready to descend in unstoppable wrath. Thus ends Part 6. The armies have clashed again in an epic confrontation. Illusions swirl in chaos, and each side stands at the brink of total war. Mandos wields dread authority. Irmo's illusions threaten to consume all. The loyal Valar muster every resource, and the Knights of Feanor watch, poised to exploit the final turn. Darkness and fire rule the battlefield, while all of Arda waits, unaware that an even greater doom, Eru's own judgment, may soon eclipse them all.